Well, hello there, friends, family, strangers on the internet. This is the first in a probably 4-part series where we're going to look at what needs to happen in Montessori so that it doesn't just totally go extinct in the next couple decades. I'm going to, in upcoming videos, have a friend and colleague join me as we take a dive into that. But first we need to establish some baseline understandings, and that's what this first video is about. Yesterday, I took my kids for a run, and our tradition is that if we hit our goal, then we go get a treat to celebrate. So we were aiming for a mile because, you know, it's winter and we're all out of shape, and we all hit it. Super exciting. My 6-year-old actually decided she wanted to run 4 miles, and she actually did it, and that's like a whole nother story for another day. But the part that I wanted to get to was, as we're driving home from our popsicle stop at Aldi, I'm looking around and I am thinking, like, okay, vehicles used to be like distinctly different. Like you could look at it and be like, okay, the shape of a sedan is like this, and the shape of a pickup, you know, is more, I mean, like you could clearly tell what you were looking at. And now as I'm driving along, like I don't even know is that like a large sedan? Is that a small SUV? Maybe a tiny minivan with no slide? I mean, I don't even know what I'm seeing. And back when they had their own shapes, they also had, you really knew what they were made for, what it was designed to do, what it could accomplish. You knew its strengths, and you also knew the limits it had, and that you had to respect those or you'd end up in trouble. So like, you knew, I'm not gonna go off-roading in my Mustang, or not gonna street race in a Suburban, right? It was very clear. But now it's hard to tell the differences. What, you know, what's happening here? They're all the same shape. But even though it's kind of like merged into this one conglomerate vehicle type, the marketing language often still persists from days of yore. Like they're very different. Like this one is sporty and fun and will take you to from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But this one, as you can see, the windshield is like 3 degrees different. The tires are an inch bigger, and this one will get you all over Alaska. It's good to go. You know, we kept the categories, even though many of the structural differences that made them distinct and gave them advantages have all blurred. And I can't help but assume that when we sanded down those edges, we also lost a lot of the strengths. Of course, there's arguments that could be made for, like, well, you know, with technology evolving, like one thing can do more. Yes, I get that. That's true. But, you know, overall, there's still different situations in which we're going to need specific traits. And it feels like that same thing is going on in our world beyond just the topic of vehicles. For instance, have you ever heard someone complain about how X whatever system doesn't work whilst they follow none of its prescribed methodologies? Okay, we've all seen this. Some of us are more tuned in and will call it out more quickly than others, but we've all seen it. Maybe a friend is complaining they've spent so much money and time at the gym with a trainer and they're still seeing no results, whilst they shovel cake down at your coffee date. And when you see them at the gym, like maybe they're sitting on a bench watching TV. Like I'm not saying we're here to judge. I'm just saying, like, you can look at it and be like, like maybe this is a clue, you know. Or you might have that one neighbor who claims budgeting just doesn't work, even though they've built such a close connection with their Amazon delivery driver that he's coming to Thanksgiving. And that's what's happening in so many areas. You can see like the disconnect here. They're claiming to be following a philosophy and then blaming the method when it doesn't produce the expected results. In our culture, pointing out someone's foolishness or double standard is offensive, even if their lack of integrity is harming them. So all that to say, let's establish right now that claiming to do one thing and not doing what it says isn't helping anyone. Looking away while someone trashes their life is also not helping them. Now, we can certainly be tactful and understanding. Like, I'm not saying we just go around nitpicking everybody's life like we're perfect, but we're not going to beat around the bush when the bush is the problem. We can't make any progress if we keep the label and then throw out all the boundaries underneath that make the system work. because those boundaries aren't arbitrary. They're not there because someone thought it should work like this. They exist because something about reality works in a certain observable way. Okay, like human bodies generally respond to nutrition and movement in certain ways, whether we like to work out or not, right? Whether we like to eat vegetables or not, that's how your body is going to work. And to pretend it isn't going to get you anywhere. Okay, relationships are strengthened or damaged by certain behaviors, whether that comes naturally to us or not. Resources, money, food, whatever, typically grow or dwindle based on how hard we work, how well we planned, how quickly we are using them. And that's true no matter how much we love our bubble teas or our cigarettes or our new cars. So when we remove the constraints, but we keep the name, it's not just a wording issue. We're actually disconnecting ourselves from the very components, the very structures that make the outcomes that we want possible. And that's why this conversation matters. Now, I'm not saying there are never variables. Like in fitness, for example, there are people who can exercise like a ton and eat really healthy, do all the things and still not see very significant results. Like we're learning more and more about things like gut bacteria and how variation in its composition can genuinely affect weight and health. So yes, outliers exist. The problem is, it's not acknowledging that some people respond differently. The problem is that culturally, we've started acting like everyone is the outlier, as if there's no consistent evidence that for most human bodies, appropriate portions and adequate physical activity produce better fitness outcomes. Instead, in so many areas, as a culture, we're behaving like clearly defined systems have no predictive value at all. We treat everyone as the outlier in domains where consistency really matters. But this is the weird one, we enforce rigid conformity in the one area where variation actually really matters most, and that's in education. We're dealing with real human beings whose brains work differently, who process things differently. And only a relatively small percentage of people thrive in the current dominant model that we're using here in the US. And yet, for some reason, that's the place where we're allowing the least flexibility. So you can see how in many ways we're keeping the names, even after the characteristics that make things effective or unique have been tossed aside in the name of like so-called modernization or progress. As if 1 + 1 = 2 is so outdated, let me tell you how it should be now. No, it just doesn't make sense. It's not realistic. So we're still claiming titles like healthy, or saying like we've got community because we're like all in 2 square acres or whatever. Christian, family, compassionate, Montessori. We're still using those long after we've abandoned all the components that define those things. Montessori is actually such a perfect case study for this topic. So in an upcoming video, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, the sensational Jessie Batten, and friend, and we're going to break down what Montessori actually means and how to tell whether a school using that name is the real thing or just a crossover with an SUV badge. Until then, I'd love to hear where you've seen this pattern. Systems that work being called ineffective or irrelevant after their core principles have gotten diluted. You might also enjoy my earlier video. It's called Montessori is Like Jesus. You can just search for it on YouTube. And if you're a parent choosing schools, I would recommend my book, Good Soil for Raising Great People. It's linked in the decision, and it's not Montessori specific. It's for evaluating any school to see if it aligns with your family's values. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.